Welcome to You Can't Break Us, the podcast sharing real stories of parental alienation and family court injustice. I'm your host, Kaylin Hawkinson. Each episode, I sit down with brave guests who open up about their personal journeys, the pain, the resilience, and the fight for justice. These stories are raw, real, and powerful because speaking out is how we break the silence and remind the world, you can't break us. Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited that you're here, founder of Adcock Coaching, LLC. If you could start us off by just giving a little bit about your background.
Yes. It's going on my 5th year. So about 4 years ago, I became a certified high conflict divorce coach. And how that came about is under personal circumstances. I was going through an extremely high conflict divorce and custody case that spanned over a decade. And as many parents know, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to keep up that financial. And so I just felt like, if I never did anything with my coaching, it would help in my own case. But that wasn't the case. It has been very, very helpful to other people. And so that's how Adcut Coaching came about. It started with just the coaching, and then it evolved into more focus on healing, which helps people to do much better in court and in life. And then now it's evolved again once into adding advocacy to that as well.
Thank you for giving that background about yourself. I just want to say that I appreciate that there is someone like you helping with healing. From my own lived experience, it's not always easy to find someone who actually specializes or is trained in these topics that can help someone through it. So I think we need more people like you out there who understand this background and can help with that. What kind of work do you do at Adcock Coaching LLC to support survivors and protective parents?
Well, like I said, back when my case started personally, there wasn't really that phrase of abusive individual versus safe parent. There wasn't a lot known. I mean, I had never heard the word narcissism prior to that. But I was lucky enough that somebody contacted me on social media and said, I think this is what you're dealing with. And so as I began to again continue to educate myself, I just basically wanted to help everybody through their court case because there was no such thing as divorce coaches when I started. But I quickly realized as we're needing much overhaul and reform in family court that I wanted to help people gently with radical acceptance. There's going to be a lot of hurdles to get through. Some are hurdles that no one will get through at this point in time because they were created that way. And so it evolved, like I said, from just coaching people on strategy, which is still very important, how you communicate with the co-parent, and how you present in front of a judge or legal counsel, evaluations, all of that. But if there's not the piece of working on healing and understanding, gaslighting, love bombing, all the different things that come with the abuse before and the abuse after, then you really are unable to prepare people for what the battle that they're going into when they thought they left it. Family court is way worse. And so if we didn't work on the healing piece, a big chunk of it comes from the psychological abuse. And so that's really where I put a lot of my healing focus is I taught a 6-week class, the Shannon Thomas book, Healing from Hidden Abuse. And so that's kind of the focus of where I started people. And then that just continued to evolve into focusing even more so on coercive control. Which then led me to work with professionals in addition to coaching families so that the professionals that are working with these families would understand what to look for.
Yes. That's really great work that you're doing. And I like that you mentioned abuse after earlier because, most people, especially maybe if they haven't lived it personally, you think when you're away from that person, the abuse is over, but that's in these type of situations, that's not the case. It can be
No.
ongoing still. How do you define coercive control and how does it differ from more visible forms of abuse?
Well, coercive control, again, a lot of people use that very, what you would say, unfilling statement. Well, I don't see any broken bones, or I don't see any bruises.
Yeah.
So coercive control has come a long ways, but we still have a long ways to go about people understanding that power and control will,
Hmm.
where we talk about the financial abuse, the stalking, the isolation, things that um, so many, like law enforcement, guardian ad litems, custody evaluators, and even judges are not educated on. And so when an abuser can come in looking very charismatic
Yeah.
and the survivor comes in looking very ragged and traumatized, and deer in the headlights in a court setting,
Yeah.
then there's a lot of things that can be hidden. But the big part of that coercive control many times is the families that have leave with children. That
Yeah.
is where the focus goes when they can no longer control you. That control transfers to the thing that they know you care about the most, and that's your children.
Yeah. Yeah. They do, unfortunately, they do retaliate or hurt the children to hurt you. And there's so many cases out there that that is the case. And to your point, it would be great that there's more trained professionals on these topics to notice that or see the signs and have this be recognized in court cases more.
Mhm.
What are some examples of coercive control that often go unnoticed in custody or court situations, which is similar to the what we kind of touched on?
A lot of times, to give one of the main ones that you hear more frequently is the gaslighting. And so again, the gaslighting movie went all the way back to many, many years ago. And so, it was kind of some of the younger people probably was like, what movie are you talking about? But now there's different things. There's several Netflix movies out there that are starting to bring that more to light. And
Hmm.
so with the gaslighting, what you see a lot of times is where the abuser will poke and poke until the other person can't take it and they react and they gently pull back and say, see, they tell their friends, see, I told you this is what I live with. Or
Yeah.
they look at their attorney and say, see, I told you she was the dysfunctional one. I'm just trying to really work with that individual. So that's a lot of what, if you're not properly trained,
Yeah.
specifically the judges and guardian ad litems, people like that can easily be like, wow, that person really seems unhinged. And
Yeah.
they go with the scenario of they're crazy.
Hmm.
So you would think, how does that work in family court? But again, it's woven in very smoothly, again, many times with the children as the focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, it is they can be very subtle about it. So unless you have a well-trained professional, it can go very unnoticed and go very wrong for the protective parent who is just loving their child and trying to do what's best for the child. Um, what are some of the biggest misconceptions professionals or courts still have about coercive control?
Well, for one thing, it's almost, you wonder if you can even say what is a misconception because some of them don't know about it at all. I actually just did a professional session with a professional who wanted to learn more about coercive control, post separation abuse, and adverse childhood experiences. And when we got done, they said, I didn't learn any of this in school.
Yeah.
And so you would think, oh, they have a degree in this.
Yeah.
But if it's not taught in the books and if they're not seeing it, in a day-to-day thing, it's not, they think something may not be right, but again, so many of them are fearful to speak up, fearful that they won't be put on another case if they talk just a little too much. And
Hmm.
so those are the things where it's not necessarily um, misguided or not seen. It's just not there at all. The
Yeah.
training's not there. And the more and more and the louder we get about trauma informed training, um, I'm even looking locally at the law enforcement side, and they even fight being trauma trained. And it's like, wow, so many of your cases are going out on domestics. Don't you want to know? I mean, and I feel like the Gabby Petito story really brought that to light,
Yeah.
in a horrible ending. But as you watch, for those of us who've dealt with it and how
Yeah.
the police handled that, that was definitely due to a lack of training.
Yeah. And to think if it was handled a little differently, it could have gone a different way. And that's really sad to think about. But it does show the importance of why we need that training in
Yes.
these situations. Um, so you've talked about how trauma responses are often mistaken for instability in court. Can you explain why that happens and what needs to change in how courts assess the parents in these situations or these cases?
Well, and like we said, a lot of times the abusers can be very charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
And because again, they don't really feel a lot of emotions, they kind of look at how people act under certain scenarios, whether it be crying in the right time
Yeah.
or whatever the case may be. But it's very, very well ingrained to, they know you well enough. Depends, and you don't even have to have been together for a long amount of time, but they
Yeah.
know the ins and outs of the survivor. And so they then in turn pass that on to their attorneys
Yeah.
or whoever they're working with to say, hey, if you poke that button, I bet you'll get a reaction. If you poke that button,
Yeah.
and a lot of them I've seen in the cases I've worked where the abusers tend to retain representation that kind
Mhm.
of acts just like them. I've seen it actually come out even with the attorneys that they go over that boundary level of professionalism
Yeah.
to poke at them. And I've even seen some of them laugh and smirk, when it comes to saying, well, you really say you were abused?
Yeah.
Really? Like, so what the biggest one that is really hard to see, even though it happens again and again, is if they were such a bad person, why did you have children with them?
Hmm.
So it's kind of like that. Why didn't you leave sooner? Why did you have children? And then when you get to family court, the biggest one you hear is just because they were a bad spouse doesn't mean they'll be a bad parent.
Yeah.
And if you see some of the posts that I've said, it is very, very blatant that if you are disrespectful to the person that you claim to have cared about the most and had children with, how in the world are you being a good parent by putting down, disrespecting, and hurting that other parent that that child has?
Hmm.
Those two can't go hand in hand. So that's a lot of what we see.
Yeah. And I just in my own personal experience, this isn't every scenario, obviously, but some people don't actually choose to have a child. They might have been in an abusive situation to begin with, or some people don't choose necessarily to even be with that person or how it unfolds.
Mhm.
So I do see a lot of speculation and assumption, even referring to, just the assumption that this is the father of your child, so this was your husband. Just from my own experience, knowing that it was nothing close to what they assume it to be,
Yep.
and it seems like it's not heard that this can happen the way it did. And so I that opened my eyes alone too to other people's cases of how that can happen. Um, so in your experience, how does judicial bias impact protective parents who are trying to advocate for their children's safety?
I think it like really, really affects it because not only were they attorneys before they were appointed judges, so they already came in with their own biases as being an attorney prior to being a judge. But in addition to that, unlike what a lot of people still want to try and refer to, it's not, oh, moms always get whatever they want. And that's not
Yeah.
the case. I have more and more seen more attorneys that are going for dads. And like I said, if you look at a lot of the research, the Saunders study, you will see that not always, because I
Hmm.
always say never say always, but that a lot of the fathers that are abusers then in turn go to attack the mothers. And
Hmm.
so when I see, I guess, a female judge attacking a mom, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, hurt people.
Yeah, I've
But
heard
many
that.
times I wonder, like, were they pulled away from their mother, their primary attachment figure? What in their bias is causing them to completely take the evidence in front of them, the professionals' opinions and recommendations, and go 100% the other way? And because they are basically given that immunity
Hmm.
from ever being in trouble for a decision they make, we're all humans. And when someone retains that much power and there's not uh, accountability, that can quickly go in the wrong direction. And I think of all the court levels, county, Supreme Court, district court, family court, that really hits hard for families because now it's almost like I'm the one wearing the robe. I'm the one who says what happens and I have the final say so. And I don't have to worry about it because I don't answer it to anybody. So I
Yeah.
really feel that that does affect cases every single day.
Yeah. And kind of to the point of evidence, in my own cases, but in other cases, I know of people who have shared their stories. Not all evidence is, and again, I'm not a legal professional. I don't know how to explain it of why this happens, but not all evidence is, it's either disregarded or it's just not even so-called like approved to show. So you could have clear evidence and it somehow is not allowed to even be heard or seen, or they won't cover that. And so that also, I don't understand that aspect to it. I would think there should be more due diligence in that aspect. How do you think professionals can better distinguish between genuine high conflict behavior and protective parents reacting to ongoing abuse?
Well, that is the one thing that we in the divorce industry are really combating against every single day, and that is highly educated professionals on all areas, except for it doesn't seem from the ones that I've talked to that trauma is part of the curriculum. And if it is, it's a very, very small percentage. And
Hmm.
since coercive control has now come out to be really big, those who have been in the field for a very long time, it's taking so much of these cases in a different direction. I will say, though, there is one case that I was recently on where sadly the case went from family court and then trickled down into juvenile court because of poor decisions that family court made.
Yeah.
And because of the materials and the education that I've collected, I was able to provide a guardian ad litem and some other court officials information on how this transpires. And I
Okay.
was thanked for that information. So that's when it's education. I mean, I could sit there
Right.
and say, well, I can't believe that you didn't get that. Or I can go together professional to professional and say, this is some of the newest information. I just wanted to make sure you had a copy. And so
Hmm.
that allows them to do more of the continuing ed,
Yeah.
because now they're starting to see there's something not right. Why are these kids coming into therapy and they seem to hate one parent, but they seem to reiterate everything the other parent says? So they're seeing that, but there wasn't terms to go with it. So with the
Hmm.
professionals, it is just basically starting to get people on board to say, the courts use the phrase again and again, best interest of the child, but instead
Yeah.
of it just being a logo, let's hold the courts accountable. And if we all work together and actually do something about it, then we're going to push up against those courts and say, this is not in the best interest of the children, and this is why they act this way, and this is why they act out, and this is what trauma informed practices are.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely, that's a topic that comes up a lot. It needs to be required, I think, at least if cases hit certain boxes, so to speak, if they have certain elements to them. I wish sometimes, there might be a professional on the case, even an amicus or a gal or whoever who's not having the proper background to really assess or see what's going on. So I wish there were even professionals that could even be like, "Hey, I'm not familiar with this, or I don't think I'm equipped to do this." At least pinpoint what's going on and get a professional in there who is equipped to handle that and catch what's going on. What are some practical changes you'd like to see in how judges, gals, or evaluators are trained regarding coercive control and trauma?
Well, in an ideal world, I guess in our ideal world, I would like to see quarterly training. Getting yearly training is like pulling teeth right now. But as another professional and I were just talking the other day, it's being on the same page. So
Yeah.
the domestic abuse shelters, the law enforcement, guardian ad litems, psychologists, family custody evaluators, all need to have the same type of training. Because if
Hmm.
you get this training and you get a little bit of this and they get a little bit of that, things are still going to fall through the cracks. So if we're doing the same, wow, isn't that amazing? When we have a conversation about a child and what's best for them, refer to page 2 of training. I think that's what we're dealing with. But their 2 might be somebody else's 5 or somebody else's 10. And
Yeah.
that's where I feel like the training really should be quarterly, and that there should be more oversight, not oversight, but overseeing
Hmm.
guardian ad litems in that field, because a lot of them, I think they just have to get some main information. I don't have all the details, but I do know that they're attorneys. And so they're appointed to cases. So it's not necessarily that they said, oh, please pick me, because most people don't want to work the high conflict cases. They want to get that easy money, get in and get out and move on to the next client, right, with the next
Yeah.
retainer. But with
Hmm.
these cases, they're court appointed, so I'm not sure if the financial incentive is really there as much. And
Hmm.
again, we're lacking in the training. So it's a cooperation, to make sure that they're compensated for their time and expertise, but then you're going to have to show me that you put in the time to show me that you're really an expert in the
Yeah.
true best interests of families.
Yeah, I agree. Again, my own personal experience in my last case, a court appointed amicus was thrown onto our case near the end, or closer to the end time of it. And so when she was put onto it, she literally was leaving the next day or two for 30 days out of the country. This is when my son's father did not send him back from a visit. He was illegally withholding him, and we had the writ of habeas approved by court. We had a date scheduled, to immediately get my son back. And the amicus said, let's hold everything. I'm going out of the country on vacation for 30 days. And she stopped it, so I have now had experience with an amicus, not obviously saying everyone out there is this way, but it was a bad experience. And even by the end of it, I mean, she dragged it on for months. It dragged on for months because she needed time to get caught up on the case. And, months later, um, we kept postponing it, giving her more time and more time just to come to the end of it. And she, word for word, said there just weren't enough hours in the day. And she still did not review our evidence. So she had no idea abuse was even involved at all. And my son was illegally there for months at that point. And so I also wish there was something to make sure that if someone is on the case, that they're doing their job, or be held accountable, because that is just, you know, again, the best interest of the child to me would not mean you didn't review the evidence, you didn't care, and here we are, like, oh well. But so I have now experienced something like that, and it's just awful to see. So you help clients reclaim their voice and rebuild after manipulation. What are some first steps someone can take when they feel silenced or broken down?
First of all, I tell people, self-care is really, really important.
Yeah.
So for example, I work a lot with them about thinking about this journey of, if the abuser had their way, you would be in contact with them around the clock. And a lot of times they like to do late nights. I mean, I used to get messages at 2 o'clock in the morning, things like that. And you're not in the right mindset to respond, or you're tired, or maybe you're ill. And so, if it does not require an immediate response, I've taught them to say, think on it. Once you get into the habit of making a response with no emotion,
Yeah.
and you're just as bland as can be, but as professional as possible,
Hmm.
it's going to come a lot more naturally for you. But I tell people, I said, do you go to work 24 hours a day? And they're like, no. And they look at you kind of funny. And I said, so why would you do this 24 hours out of a day? I said, make it business hours. This is, maybe you check messages twice a week. And I always tell them, check with your attorney to make sure that whatever judge you're going in front of and that they're familiar with is okay at how you would do things. I said, but again, don't do it right before you're getting your kids back. All the kids are going to feel the tension. And when they start acting out and you're overtired, it
Hmm.
doesn't make a good situation for either one of you. And if the kids are with you, you parent on your time. And as we've been told a lot, you can't really use the term co-parenting. You have to use parallel parenting. So
Yeah.
they parent on their time. There's going to be a lot of things that you don't like, because a counter parent, if you have a bedtime at 8, they'll make it 10. If they
Yeah.
eat vegetables, they're going to feed them candy. It's
Right.
just the name of their games.
Yeah.
But with that healing, I always say, people think, well, in order to take care of myself, that's going to be so expensive. No, a bubble bath, very cheap. Um, 15 minutes of a nice long shower. It depends on what age your kids are. But again, taking that time, I wish somebody had told me all these years ago that on the weekends my children weren't with me, that I would take time to take care of me.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. It has to be practiced. It doesn't come overnight.
Hmm.
But if you're doing this constantly, there's no way that you're going to be ready for those hearings. And that's where we're going to see some of those trauma responses, people having anxiety attacks in and out of the courtroom.
Yeah.
Judges really don't like to see emotions.
Yeah.
So to pour on the tears, sadly, especially when you have a female judge in front of you that basically says, oh, maybe you're just not stable. Well, for any mom to put emotion into something, that's a baby that you carried for 9 months. That is a
Yeah.
child that you care about and was part of you. And so, but there's certain things that you must do. And so in order to do that, I use the analogy of the plane's going down. How can I help somebody? I have to put the oxygen mask on myself first. And so as a parent, I remind them, I said, you care about your kids, right? And they're like, well, of course. And I said, then you must put the oxygen on first so that you can fill their cup every time they're with you. You know they're not going to have that cup filled because they're being used as pawns. So it is very imperative that you self-care so that you can pour into your kids.
Yeah. Yes, healing is so important. Parents, it's you have your child and your life becomes your child. The child comes first. You're
Mhm.
doing everything for your child. So it can be common that you forget to take care of your own self. And especially when dealing with either high conflict or abusive situations or whatever the case is, if that parent especially is kind of using the child or putting the child in the middle of adult scenarios, and you know that it's just not right, it's not the best interest of the child, uh it it even becomes that much harder because you're always worried, you're always focused on helping the child.
Mhm.
And especially parents who maybe where the one parent is withholding the child, kind of to the term alienation of, not allowing the parent to see that child or doing something to that extent. It's so heartbreaking, it's devastating, depressing, all emotions. So it's still very important to do self-care and heal, because when that child is around or comes back around, you want to be that safe space. You want to have that and the energy, the help, because
The
they are
empathy.
obviously, yeah, they are obviously being traumatized too in that type of situation. So you also need to be that guide to help the child when they do need it as well. So, you recently authored a short ebook for professionals assessing children influenced by an abusive parent. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I just recently finished that, and I hope to come out with a second one here shortly for parents of what for them to look for as well. But
Oh,
my
okay.
big thing is when I did my last training, it was amazing how they told me, we didn't get this like in textbook.
Yeah.
And so we're just kind of like learning all of this stuff alongside the families. And
Yeah.
so with it, I included things in there. Like I said, if a professional wants to meet with me, they're welcome to contact me after this. But um, things to look for in the child's behavior was a big thing, based upon uh, all the certification information I just got on coercive control,
Yeah.
but also with lived experience and watching how children are at a therapy session in front of the parent they feel safe with versus the parent that they don't feel safe with. And so a
Hmm.
lot of it was, like I said, not a lot of things, but it was basically just a question and then a space for that professional to take notes
Okay.
so that if they really, again, we're looking at the best interest of a child, they could go back and before they made any kind of recommendation, look at those behaviors and then say, okay, so what do the studies show us about those behaviors? Because they
Yeah.
don't have to look very far to know what post-separation abuse is, and it typically comes with the control of the children. And so if you look at those things, I use the bank example. They say, when you are looking for real money versus counterfeit money, what do you
Okay.
study? People are like, oh, counterfeits. And they said, no, you study the real so that you know. And so as professionals, I'm having them dig into those questions to say, okay, this is what you see right in front of you. Now, if you take this along with the information you've been trained, and again, that's what we're looking for, more trauma informed training, it will
Yeah.
just be like it just matches up like DNA. And it will be
Yeah.
like, oh, that's why they're acting that way. Oh,
Hmm.
because again, I remember hearing many, many years ago the saying, the child, whichever parent they feel the safest with, that is who they will act out with. And the longer I worked in it, I realized they do.
Yeah.
They
Hmm.
lash out because they know that they're not going to get screamed at, they're not going to get smacked. That parent is going to sit there and listen, hug them, love on them. And so now what we just need is to transfer that into the professionals because that's who the courts listen to. A lot of times they don't listen to parents.
Yeah, exactly. We need to have a trained professional be able to come in and give that expertise opinion that a judge will actually really take into consideration in that aspect. Um, it kind of just reminds me, kind of a little off topic. There's always boxes to check in cases sometimes, like even a high conflict or abusive situation, they might say you're required to take this co-parenting class online just to check a box and say you did it.
Yep.
Um, well, when I took the parenting class online, the very first things that came up, it gave kind of this checklist or bullet point list of saying, okay, well, if your case deals with abuse and alienation and coercive and blah, 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 it had these, list, then it said, this is not for you. That's a completely different kind of case. Well, mine checked all those boxes, and I asked, why are we taking this? That it alludes to that there is something else that can help, or something else that, oh, there is nothing else. You have to just take that. Well, why did it say that there would be something else though? Because if there isn't. But so that I understand they make us do that, but yeah, I just thought that's another point to show that you don't actually have a trained professional here. You don't actually have something in place to actually help that type of case or situation. Uh,
Well, and I found myself very early on educating the mediation people because looking at state law, like I read through things, I had things highlighted, printed off, and they said if there was documented domestic abuse, then they would handle it very different. They don't.
mhm,
It's a given. So the first couple times, yeah, I probably look like the traumatized parent, and I know that, I again, that's what I had lived. But as we went on, it got to the point where it became a dialogue between me and the mediation person that I would meet with that clearly now recognized this is not a co-parenting training. We're going to talk about parallel parenting. Now, mind you, everything that they talked to me about, I had already done my own research,
yeah,
but unfortunately, and that's a topic for another podcast, but the court system, family court system, gets their funding, their federal funding,
mhm,
by making mediation.
okay,
And so instead of saying we won't do that when we know there's domestic violence,
yeah,
they're still doing it because if not, then guess what? They don't get their bonus. So that's again
yeah,
another different conversation. But back to
yeah,
what you had just asked, and I'll just give a sneak peek into that ebook. The first one I want professionals to look at is inconsistencies in answers
yeah,
because knowing the difference between a professional that was basically trained versus somebody who really cared and was advanced trained,
yeah,
I could tell the difference in the ones that would come out and say that was a coerced answer. They and there were certain words that children would use,
mhm,
like, "Well, I was told to tell you,"
yeah,
things like that. So right off the bat, you would think, "Well, that's easy," but not everybody sees it that way. So I want
mhm,
them to start out in the very beginning saying, what inconsistencies did I see? And as I continue to build a rapport with those children, have they got any more consistent, or do I still consider how many inconsistencies? Now I've seen them for a month. Now I've
mhm,
seen them for 2 months.
yeah.
there's a problem with all these inconsistencies.
Yeah.
So is it they're not comfortable? And sometimes a therapist has to bow out because they're saying, I just wasn't able to connect. But it's just like any other practice, you find people that you connect with.
Yeah.
And so if all of them have this resources, then they'll be able to pair the children and the professional with those who connect. And then
Hmm.
they'll really be able to use this ebook effectively.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you wrote this as a resource for people. Um, and even kind of to that point of, if they could have a trained professional come in and not even just talk to the child, but even both parents, just all around, because I also think the coaching aspect, or maybe a parent is telling the child what to say, the manipulation, the coercion, um, they can maybe not right away, but over time see the verbatim that child is matching a certain parent. And that also shows that that's
Mhm.
happening. Um, how can advocates, coaches, or even parents use your book as a tool for better understanding awareness of this, which you touched on as well from answering the last one, but is there any more you want to give to that nature of it?
It's just, again, if we can combine the information where they can take notes with those basic questions, and then if they will go a step further and align it with trauma informed practices,
Yeah.
I think, we would have a win-win situation there. And again, it comes down to the best interests of families and doing what's
Yes.
good for them, not and destroying them and tearing them apart.
Right. Exactly. And so finally, what does reclaiming your narrative mean to you, and how can survivors begin that process?
Well, reclaiming your power and taking that back,
Yeah.
it's a step by step process. It doesn't come overnight. And
Right.
like I ask my clients to understand that nothing comes overnight. I mean, if you do a good habit, they say you have to do it for like 30 to 45 days before it actually becomes a habit. Statistics have
Hmm.
shown that. But I
Yeah.
tell them, I said, think about it as taking a journey. I said, you can't just come to one session and we got all the answers and we're good to go, because there's going to be high points, there's going to be setbacks, whether it be a court hearing or something that transpires in your case specifically.
Yeah.
um, and so I have the saying that I use quite often: it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Hmm.
And so be patient with yourself. Learn that doing things with healthy boundaries is a good thing. And
Hmm.
it's going to take a while to get into that pattern of saying, I deserve better. I'm worth it. But a
Hmm.
lot of that time is, spent um, learning about yourself,
Yeah.
relearning yourself, and saying, I'm going to give a new script and a new narrative.
Yeah.
I'm the one in charge of this now. I don't have to listen to the things that was told that I was or that I'm not.
Right.
It's a whole redirection of life. And so for me, like I said, I went over a decade. So it was really hard. What people don't understand is when you heal from divorce, and if you just got divorced and then you started,
Yeah.
well, that's another story. But when you keep reliving it in court again and again and again and again, you keep starting healing, stopping, starting, stopping.
Right.
So have to understand that they have to be patient with themselves with that. And
Hmm.
there's times where many get to the point where they say, I'm more interested in a future and in healing than who had the last word in
Yeah.
court.
Yeah.
So it's all about, what do I want for my future? What do I want my children to learn from this? Do I want them to grow up seeing a broken individual? Or
Hmm.
do I want them to see what a healed, strong, thank you, but no thank you parent is
Yeah.
capable of doing? So
Yeah.
that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, being that role model still for the child, because clearly if the other parent is to that extent, either abusive or narcissist or alienation or coercion, those, behaviors is not a good role model for the child. So it is very hard to have that impact from being in that yourself and treated that way, but also remembering again, we need to take care of ourselves and work on healing and show our child we can do that and they can do that and we can help the child do that at some point, hopefully, if they need it. And so before we go though, I want to make sure to if you could let people know how to find you or your ebook.
The ebook I still need to download. Like I said, once we started
Yeah.
talking about it, I figured I'd wait on that until we had our podcast. But
Okay.
I can be reached at www.adcockcoachingllc.com.
Okay.
That gives you the handles to my social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn, kind of just been surrounded with just a wealth of knowledge and great people. I do some on Facebook and Instagram, but LinkedIn and TikTok are my big ones.
Okay.
And I have two accounts on TikTok. Divorce with Tammy is more of just really the divorce coaching.
Okay.
Strength Found is my own personal story, and then just more things that are happening. A lot of times I will give honor to people that we've lost or just
No.
stories in the media so that people keep up to date with that.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I give a sneak peek on what I'm up to in my own journey. But so those are the basics for me. If you want to give me a phone call, 531-310-1061. But like I said, from the website, there's a contact form. So it tries to, accommodate every which way that people like to use social media.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I'll make sure to also put links when I do release this as well so they can easily find you. Thank you so much for taking your time today, Tammy. You gave a lot of really valuable information, and I really truly appreciate that and the work you're doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And like I said, this topic is so important to me. I
Yeah,
really appreciate you getting that word out. So thank you.
thanks. Thank you for listening to You Can't Break Us. If this episode spoke to you, subscribe and leave a review. Every voice matters. Every story counts. If you or someone you know has a story to share, email youcantbreakuspodcast@gmail.com to connect with me. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and never stop using your voice. Because no matter what they've tried to take from us,